In the quiet, snow-draped town of Pine Ridge, nestled deep in the Colorado Rockies, fate had woven a mystery that no one could have foreseen. Dr. Thomas Walker, a dedicated trauma surgeon, was no stranger to long nights and exhausted departures from the town hospital. But one bitter evening, something unusual stopped him in his tracks. Outside the hospital entrance, a lone bobcat kitten sat motionless, its fur dusted with frost. Its golden eyes, steady and knowing, seemed to hold a question, one that only Thomas could answer. At first, it was just an oddity, a fleeting moment of curiosity. But when the kitten returned night after night, its silent vigil unbroken, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that this was no mere coincidence. What was it waiting for? And why did it refuse to leave? As the nights passed and the mystery deepened, Thomas found himself drawn into something far beyond logic, a connection that blurred the lines between man and nature, science and fate. Was this just an abandoned creature in need of help, or the start of something far greater? The first snow of winter had begun to fall over Pine Ridge. Dr. Thomas Walker pulled his coat tighter as he exited the hospital after a grueling 14-hour shift. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the freshly dusted pavement, and his breath hung in the air like small clouds. As he approached his car, a movement near the hospital entrance caught his eye. There, huddled against the cold stone wall, was a small creature with tufted ears and distinctive facial markings, a bobcat kitten. Its amber eyes, luminous in the dim light, seemed fixed on the hospital doors with an almost human intensity. Thomas hesitated. Wild animals weren't uncommon in Pine Ridge, but they rarely ventured this close to town, especially to sit exposed outside a busy hospital. "Hey there, little one," Thomas said softly, keeping a respectful distance. The kitten blinked slowly but didn't retreat. Instead, it seemed to study him with those penetrating eyes before returning its attention to the hospital entrance. Thomas noted the kitten's thin frame and the way it shivered slightly in the bitter cold. Against his better judgment, he pulled a protein bar from his pocket, unwrapped it, and placed half on the ground several feet from the animal before backing away. To his surprise, the kitten approached cautiously, sniffed the offering, and then delicately consumed it. "You're hungry, huh?" Thomas murmured. "Where's your mother?" The kitten finished eating and then, to Thomas's astonishment, returned to its position by the wall, eyes once again trained on the hospital doors. For 5 consecutive nights, Thomas observed this pattern. The kitten appeared as darkness fell, remained through the night, and was gone by morning. Its presence became something of a personal mystery to Thomas, one that nagged at him during the quiet moments of his shifts. On the 6th night, as a particularly harsh snowstorm descended on Pine Ridge, Thomas arrived at the hospital entrance with a small insulated shelter he'd constructed from a storage container lined with thermal blankets. The bobcat kitten was already there, its fur dusted with snow, looking particularly vulnerable against the worsening elements. "You can't stay out in this," Thomas told it as he set down the makeshift shelter. "I don't know why you're here, but I can't let you freeze." To his relief, after he'd retreated to a distance, the kitten cautiously investigated the shelter and eventually curled up inside it, though its eyes remained watchful, focused on those hospital doors. As Thomas walked away, he nearly collided with Sarah Jensen, a night shift nurse he'd worked with for years. "Sorry," he apologized. "I was distracted." Sarah followed his gaze. "Is that a bobcat?" she asked incredulously. Thomas nodded. "A kitten. It's been sleeping here every night for almost a week." "That's unusual," Sarah said, frowning. "Wild animals don't typically do that without reason." "My thoughts exactly," Thomas agreed. "There's something almost purposeful about the way it watches the hospital. I can't explain it, but I feel like it's waiting for someone." Sarah's expression softened. "You always were a softie for strays, Thomas," she said, but her tone was kind. "Remember that 3-legged coyote you rehabilitated last year?" Thomas smiled faintly. "This feels different. There's a story here, Sarah. I can sense it." Thomas's curiosity led him to Edward Blackwood, an elderly wildlife biologist who had passed away a month earlier. Edward had found the bobcat kitten, Max, orphaned after a storm and had raised him with the intention of releasing him back into the wild. But Edward's battle with cancer had cut their time short, leaving Max without closure. Thomas discovered Edward's detailed plans for Max's release in a journal at his cabin. The entries were filled with love, care, and a deep understanding of the wild. Edward had even chosen a specific release site, hoping someone would complete his work. With the help of wildlife experts, Thomas followed Edward's plan. Max was relocated to a protected area, where he gradually adapted to his natural habitat. On the day of his final release, Thomas watched as Max stepped into the wild, his amber eyes reflecting the freedom he had always deserved. As Max disappeared into the forest, Thomas felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had honored Edward's legacy and given Max the life he was meant to live. The story of the Bobcat's vigil became a reminder of the connections that bind us all, human and animal, life and death, love and freedom. Months later, a remote wildlife camera captured Max thriving in his new home. Thomas kept the photo on his desk, a symbol of the unexpected journey that had changed him forever. And on Edward's grave, a small plaque now reads, "Friend to wild things."